Okay.
No.
Well, no. We're live. So, Tim, I'm glad you're sitting down because we're live. We're live in front of thousands of people that are waiting to hear your presentation. So we're gonna wait. We're gonna wait a couple of minutes, everybody, before Tim starts his presentation. But I am honored to be able to talk to a person who I think is one of the nicest human beings who's ever graced the planet, Tim Linehan. If you've ever visited Tim's operation or you've ever met Tim, you know that's true. But Tim is just a great human being. He's been in the Orvis and Doris program for many years and has been a stalwart guide and conservationist and TV star. What was the TV show you were into?
Trout Unlimited Television.
Yeah, well, there was that, and then there was the other one. Yeah, but there was the other one with your neighbor.
Right. No. Yeah, Mountain Men.
Mountain Men. Yeah.
Mountain Men.
So you may have seen Tim, and Tim and his wife Joanne run an incredible operation in northern Montana, and we'll talk about that a little bit at the end. But I'm sure that Tim is going to have some wonderful tips. What we're gonna do today is kind of give you an idea of how to plan a trip to the Rockies and specifically Montana, because it's one of the most popular fishing destinations in the world. And now that a lot of us are getting vaccines and we're more comfortable about traveling, we're going to be able to go to places like this, and it's going to be crowded, I'm sure, this summer. It's going to be very crowded because a lot of people, there's just a lot of pent up demand to go fishing in places other than close to home. So, but there are lots of places to get away from the crowds too if you're not interested in fishing the very famous rivers. So Tim's going to give you some tips on that. So I think we're a couple minutes in, Tim. We probably, hopefully people are on time, and let's start. Let's talk about you.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you very much for having me, Tom. I'll comment about before we get started. I'll comment about the crowding issue. I agree. It probably will be crowded. Everybody wants to be outside again, and certainly, we saw a bump in outdoor activities last year during COVID because obviously that's all a lot of people could do was be outside. But I wanted to remind people, if you're looking to get away from the crowds, don't forget about still water. I mean, we all run, I think, or not we all, but many of us are more interested in rivers, and rivers sort of capture our fly fishing imagination a little more readily, I think, sometimes, and especially in the Rocky Mountain West. But still water offers, ponds and lakes and other still water opportunities offer a great way to get away from the crowds. I mean, you can drop a belly boat over the side of a bank and have a wonderful time in many places, and maybe see one or two other people. I think that's just something to keep in mind if you're looking to get away from the crowds. And tributaries are another great way. Get off of the main stems and find the little creeks and poke around in places that aren't obviously and necessarily as crowded as the main stem of the famous mussel rivers that we all love to fish. They're crowded because they're great and we all love to fish them, but lots of water and lots of other places to go besides the main stem of the mussel rivers. So with that, without further ado, I'll get started here, Tom.
The mussel rivers? The mussel rivers? Is that what you're calling them?
Yeah, I don't know what I meant by that. The big rivers, the big famous rivers.
I like that though. I like that.
Rather than the small streams and creeks or no names, rather than the no names, right? I don't know why, but big. I was thinking mussel is in big western rivers. Yeah. Anyway,
Yeah, okay. Mhm.
so let's see. Without further ado, I'll try and stick with my outline. I've got five sort of themes that I'll move through, Tom, and we can take questions as I understand it. But the first one will be fisheries, and I will be more Montana centric for obvious reasons. But a lot of the once I get down to gear and stuff, a lot of that stuff will be applicable, obviously, to Idaho and Colorado and Wyoming and the other Rocky Mountain states. But I'll be a little bit Montana centric, particularly when I talk about the fisheries. Will be number one, and number two, I'll cover seasons and the seasons of the fisheries, more specifically in the Rocky Mountain West and Montana. And then broadly tackle and gear, techniques, broadly dry fly, nymphing, and streamer fishing. And then I'll finish up quickly toward the end with Kootenai specific, all things Kootenai and specifically Kootenai. So if that works for you, I'll start with fisheries in Montana, Tom. Should we head right into it?
Works for me, Tim.
Okay. So in the state of Montana, folks, there's some of you know an awful lot about Montana, and some of you may not. So I'll just kind of assume that we're all somewhere in between. But if we break Montana down, geographically, that's the best way to do it. And we'll start with the east, eastern Montana. So in the east, the most famous fishery, the Muscle Rivers over there, the Muscle River over there would be south of Billings, Montana, and that would be the Bighorn River. And the Bighorn River is a tailwater. I'll also be discussing the difference between tailwaters and freestones. But the Bighorn River, south of Billings, Montana, is a tremendous fishery, been noted for many, many years as being a wonderful fishery with solid numbers of fish and great hatches. That's the thing about the Bighorn River. The Bighorn River is another one of these tailwaters that's particularly fertile. I'll talk a little bit about that as I start to move through some of the other rivers, but the Bighorn is a tailwater, and very, very specifically, it's especially fertile. The geography of that area lends itself to very fertile waters that produce bugs, and bugs produce fish, or fish food makes big fish and lots of fish. So the Bighorn is sort of out in the middle of nowhere. It's in a way a destination fish, not in a way. It is definitely a destination fishery. That is, you're not necessarily in an area that will lend itself to spending a day on the Bighorn and then bombing 20 miles downstream the next day and seeing a different stretch or doing something differently. If you're on the Bighorn River, you're typically on the Bighorn River and only the Bighorn River. So that's just something to keep in mind. You can arrive in Billings, and then you can head south from Billings, and there's a number of great fly shops and lodges on the Bighorn that offer amenities, and but for all intents and purposes, it's destination. And you got to want to be there, and you're typically going to spend 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 days specifically on the Bighorn. Moving to the west, we will be in southwest Montana. We'll start in southwest Montana. Southwest Montana may be the most, until recently, I think southwest Montana was the most noted part of the state as far as fisheries and as far as, those famous muscle rivers, to use the term again. But in the southwest part of the state, Bozeman would sort of be the main recognized town, where, that's the fly in and out of Bozeman, Montana. And then, of course, Yellowstone. The park is down there, and the park offers a tremendous amount of fishing, as most of you probably know. So that goes without saying. But in the park, you can do just about anything you want. You can fish. The Madison River starts in the park. The Gallatin River starts in the park. There are small streams, creeks. Some of them are famous, and they used to not even be spoken about. But it seems like everything's been spoken about these days. But there's all sorts of water in Yellowstone. The Fire Hole is another famous river in the Yellowstone Park, and they all offer just wonderful fishing year round. I'll get to a little bit of that in just a moment. But moving again, staying in the southwest, obviously you have the Yellowstone River, would be the main artery, obviously one of the biggest rivers down there. And then, of course, the Madison River, a little bit farther over, is the Big Hole River and the Beaverhead River. And so that southwest corner of Montana is noted and famous in the books and in the stories and in the magazines still because of how much water is accessible within, oh boy, 2 or 3 hours. You know, you can base in West or Bozeman or somewhere like that, West Yellowstone or Bozeman, and you could fish a different river, every single day for 10 or 15 days if you had the luxury of that much time and a wonderful vacation to that end. So that's sort of the southwest part of the state. And again, there are many, many feeder streams and creeks and tributaries that also, flow into these muscle rivers, the bigger rivers, but typically they're a little less traveled, and that's a good thing sometimes. But they all, in Montana, most of the small streams are going to carry wild and native fish, and some native and mostly wild, all wild in the state of Montana. Let's keep in mind that Montana doesn't stock any major rivers or streams. It's an all wild fishery across the state of Montana. But that's a great way to sort of fish a ton of water in one general location, southwest Montana. Moving up into the central part of the state, right between Helena and Great Falls, the biggest fishery, the most famous fishery up in that area would be the Missouri. And the Missouri River is, again, a tailwater, like the Bighorn River. Let me back up for a second, but around Yellowstone, most of those rivers would all be freestone. They would be, they are not dammed, and they are all freestone, and they're very, very different. The Bighorn River, as I said, is a tailwater, and the Missouri River between Helena and Great Falls is a spectacular fishery. The Missouri River, the fishery starts below Holter Dam, and the fishery runs for, probably I'm just 35, 40 miles down to Cascade, Montana. And then it starts to get broad and flatten out, not so much trout water. But I'm guessing most of you out there have heard of at least the Missouri, and probably a lot of you have fished the Missouri. It may also be, at this point, one of the most famous fisheries in the state of Montana when we're talking about the muscle rivers, the big main arteries.
Tim, can we just define Tim? Can we just define tailwater for people?
Yes,
I mean, you already did, but just to stress it. Very, very good. I actually think I glossed over it, and it was my intent to do that before I started, running down through the rivers. So a tailwater fishery is below a dam. That's the biggest difference. So the difference between, so a tailwater fishery is below a dam. A freestone river, or a freestone stream, as we call them, is undammed. It's as simple as that. It is literally about freestone. The stones are able to roll every year because you get high runoff, and freestones change every single year, and they get tremendous volumes of water in the western United States in the springtime, and then the hydrograph slowly starts to come down through the summer, and in the fall they're super low, and they're even lower still in the wintertime. Tailwaters, on the other hand, are below a dam. Obviously, above the dam will be a reservoir or a monster lake, depending on the fishery, thereby, always having generally speaking, a more constant flow of water, constant temperatures, et cetera, et cetera. So, but essentially, for the sake of this argument, Tom, a tailwater fishery is below a dam, and freestone streams and rivers are not dammed. Simple as that. Thank you, Tim.
Does that work? Yep. Okay.
That works.
So the Missouri River, back to the Missouri in central Montana, guys, spectacular fishery. One of my favorite fisheries for a variety of reasons. And I don't really have time. Maybe another time we can get a little bit more specific. But the Missouri, like the Bighorn, is especially fertile, and it's not necessarily the tailwaters. Tailwaters aren't necessarily extremely fertile on their own, but more or less sometimes, or more often, I should say, because of the geography. That's typically what would make a what would make a fishery biologically more fertile than another fishery. The geology, rather. I said geography, I meant geology. And feel free to chime in on this piece, Tom. But because the geology, soft ground, soft earth, lots of fertile ground, that sort of a thing. You're basically out on the prairie, and glaciers dumped a ton of soft sediment out on the Rocky Mountain front, and as you come off the Rocky Mountain front out onto the prairie. And that's all very, very fertile ground. It carries lots of nutrients, and it carries lots of, it has the elements that produce a very fertile fishery. And I'll compare that when I talk about the Kootenai. But the Missouri River is spectacular, tremendous hatches. You can fish the Missouri River 12 months a year. They do. It's a wonderful fishery. So, if you haven't been there, that's also a spectacular fishery any time of the year, really. Moving now to the Northwest. And again, I'm very much sticking with the sort of the bigger, the main arteries, let's say, of the fisheries around the state of Montana. So moving into the Northwest, usually we kind of consider the Northwest to start around Missoula. If you draw a straight line up from Missoula, you can see Missoula on the slide there, I think, Tom, or is it missing? Yeah, I see half that got cut off, Tom. Anyway, okay. Anyway, Missoula would be sort of the start of the northwest part of the state. And if you draw a straight line, basically just run right up the Continental Divide, and that would be the sort of northwest corner of Montana. Missoula has become sort of another mecca of fly fishing in the state of Montana. Missoula offers a tremendous variety of water, like the Yellowstone area to a degree, but Missoula, Montana offers the Clark Fork River, the Bitterroot River, the Blackfoot River, and Rock Creek. And those are all really, really great fisheries. Those are also noted. And if you haven't, most likely, I'm guessing most of you folks have heard of all those rivers as well. And probably a lot of you have fished those rivers maybe even every year. But that's the other great thing about Missoula. Like the Yellowstone country, you can park in Missoula. You could base yourself in Missoula, and you could spend, a week and not see the same piece of water every single day. I mean, you could fish a different stretch of water every single day. And that's a wonderful thing. That offers a lot of mobility. You can be mobile, you can try different things, you can see different water. You can walk, wade, great access, you can float a boat, right? There's just a whole lot to do. Clark Fork River, Bitterroot River, Blackfoot River, and Rock Creek. And that's sort of the start of the Northwest. And that would be, again, based around Missoula. Moving farther north and west, way up into the far northwest corner, we obviously have Glacier National Park, which offers some great fishing. Excuse me. And Glacier is a not quite like Yellowstone as far as the available amount of water, but still some good fishing to be had. The Flathead River would be the main artery. That would be the Muscle River up in the Glacier area. Obviously, the Flathead Valley is a wonderful place. Whitefish, Montana, Kalispell, Montana. Those are very, very cool towns. The Flathead River is a fantastic fishery. There's a lot of still water in Glacier National Park. Unlike Yellowstone, not so moving water oriented, right? There's the Flathead comes out of there, and there are some creeks that come out of there, but very, very high gradient. The Glacier National Park is, particularly lovely and beautiful because of its grandeur, because of its elevations, because of its sawtooth ranges, right? But that also means you're going to have high gradients. So the Flathead would be the best fishery for that reason. And then, as I mentioned, stillwater fishing in the park is almost, it offers as much in Glacier as it does anywhere in the state. So the Flathead would be terrific over in that area. And then jumping farther west again, we're up in here to my country. As I sit, I'm in a little place called Yaak, Montana. And the Kootenai River is the main artery, the Muscle River up here. Let me back up for a second. The Flathead River is It's kind of a combination. There is a dam on the Flathead, but as it comes out of glacier, it's still a freestone. So you could say the top end of it is a freestone, and then you hit a dam, and thereafter it starts to become a tailwater. But again, moving over to the farther west now, we're into the Kootenai, and the Kootenai is a big river. The Kootenai is big and broad and a big muscle river. It is a tailwater also, and it offers fishing about 9 months out of the year. We can have a pretty substantial winter up here. Same with the Flathead. We don't really typically fish too much in January or February unless we get some warmer weather. But both good fisheries, the Flathead and the Kootenai River, and offer, a little bit more of a destination, like the Bighorn River, a little bit more of a destination type fishery. Libby, Montana is a small town. Yak, where I live, is just a little crossroads. Whitefish and Kalispell, fairly good sized towns, but really mostly the Flathead River as a fishery, as a destination, and here the Kootenai River as a destination. Lots of tributaries, lots of creeks, lots of small stream fishing, lots of still water opportunities in the Flathead Valley over near Kalispell and Whitefish, and then also here in my area, little glacial ponds and glacial lakes and alpine lakes and things of that nature that are going to be far less crowded this time of, this coming year, as per our earlier comments at the beginning of the show, Tom. So that's a broad overview of the general fisheries around the state of Montana. Now, I have left out a couple. There's some other special places like the Smith River and some other places like that, but they're a little less accessible and more more specific to camping trips and that kind of a thing. But the rivers that I covered in the east and the central, southwest and northwest part of the state, those would sort of be the ones that you would want to poke around on, that are easily accessible, easy to find information. These areas all have fly shops, lodges, amenities, that sort of a thing that could also provide a lot of information. Each one of these, each one of these areas and rivers and fisheries has an Orvis endorsed operation. Some of them have several. So you can find information on all these. And then on most of these rivers, there are books and stories and all sorts of articles that you can access as far as where to stay and what to do and regarding the amenities. So that's an overview there, Tom.
Okay, Tim, we have a question. Well, you were going to talk about seasons, and this is probably a good point to talk about runoff. And although it's very difficult to predict what conditions are going to be like in June anywhere, but what's the runoff prediction for the whole state in general this year?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Most of the state did okay. It was not a big snow year across the state, but most fisheries were close to 100%. Some were over. I see specifically this question is heading to Rock Creek in late June. I think you're going to be perfect, Shane. I think Rock Creek in late June is going to be just about right. Missoula did get a fair bit more snow than we did. The Upper Clark Fork. When I say we did, up here where I am, literally we ended up here in the Kootenai drainage 89 or 92% or something like that. But I know that the Bitterroot range got good snow, up over 100. The Upper Clark Fork got up over 100. So I think that, generally speaking, I think that it's going to be at least a fair plus to good water year here in Montana. To Tom's point, yes, that all depends on what we get for a summer. We go 90 and sunny in late June, and that sure eats up a lot of water. But specifically, Shane, heading to Rock Creek in late June, I think you're going to nail it. I think that should be just about right. And I think you'll probably still see stoneflies, and I think you'll probably have a pretty good time late June. Yeah.
And we should probably talk about the runoff season, just for people that aren't familiar with the Rockies, because if they're from the east or the south, You don't have big snowpacks, and the snow comes off usually in April, and the water gets a little high, and then things stabilize. But in the Rocky Mountains, you can arrive at a stream and it can be totally blown out and nearly unfishable, dirty, high, dangerous, as late as what? June, mid-June sometimes, right?
Yeah. Oh, into July, Tom. I mean, on a big snow year, even into July, right? There have been years here on the Kootenai, and it's a tailwater, and we didn't run a trip till July 12th or something like that. July 13th. So I think on a big snow year, it can even go into July. I think that the best way to approach that is to contact the local shops and the local guides and the local Orvis and Doris operations that are in those specific fisheries, and they will give you a much better idea before you head, before you specifically head that way. That's always a great way. Don't forget that this day and age, there's a tremendous amount of resources available. You can go on the USGS website and get a ton of information. Literally, you can get the exact runoff conditions, when forecasts, and there are some apps now, Tom. Riverflow, I think Riverflow is one, and they can give you a 5-day prediction. I mean, we're now even. I mean, I pull out that app now if I'm on, say, the Bitterroot in April, and I know I've got a couple of days of 70 degrees. Some of those apps will actually give you a great idea. How do you really know? But geez, it's going to come up another 400 CFS in the next 24 hours. That's really good information. So, but I think that. Awesome. So there's a lot of resources, folks. Keep in mind that regarding snowmelt and runoff and stuff like that, you can do way more homework than you used to be able to. That's for darn sure. But the spring can be iffy. I mean, the one thing, I'll get to seasons here in just a second. I was gonna start with winter, but while we're on it, spring, I would just say watch out for May on Freestone Stream. Watch out for May and the first 2 weeks of June on Freestone streams, right? Tailwaters are going to be a little bit more or a little less susceptible to blowing out. But watch out May and the first 2 weeks of June on the Freestone streams across the state of Montana, and maybe even across the West. That's generally a real good rule, I think, folks, to sort of go by. May in the first 2 weeks of June, I often tell people, watch out. You know what I mean? You could it could be great, or you could get smoked. Yeah. So, shall I go straight to seasons, Tom? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So the next thing I've got on the docket here, guys. Yeah. Okay. So the next thing I've got, folks, I've got seasons, and again, a little more Montana centric, but this will generally hold true for the rest of the Rocky Mountain West. I'll start with winter. Let's just start with January 1, or after Christmas, or however you want to look at it. There is some great fishing across the Rocky Mountain West during the winter time, and I think that as the sport got a little more popular, people started to decide, I'm thinking 15, 20, 25 years ago, there were a few guys, you'd see them out there and you'd be like, that guy's nuts. That guy's crazy. He's out there. Tom Rosenbauer would be out there 30 years ago in January. Not too many of us were necessarily doing that sort of a thing 25 or 30 years ago. Tom was, and a few of his buddies, but fishing in the winter now is actually pretty popular. And speaking of getting away from crowds, great way to get away from the crowds. So across the Rocky Mountain West, there's some great fishing during the winter times. The tailwaters, right? The tailwaters folks will always, generally speaking, will offer more consistent and probably better fishing than the freestone streams, generally speaking, than during the winter months. And the reason for that is freestone streams can get ice. Freestone streams can get snow, big snow right down the banks, and freestone water temperatures can hover right above freezing for obvious reasons. Tailwaters, on the other hand, are always going to be a little bit warmer because they don't freeze anymore. The water is coming from a reservoir that is, generally speaking, capped with ice in the Rocky Mountain West. The water below it is obviously not frozen. So it's going to come out of the dam oftentimes in the high 30s, even 40s sometimes. So freestone streams can offer some fantastic fishing during the wintertime. And mostly due to the nature of so tailwaters can offer some really good fishing during the wintertime due to the nature of the water temperatures and the conditions of the river. So what I'm gonna also, Tom, with the seasons, I think what I'll do, folks, is I will include what to pack quickly, right? So if you're thinking about, let's say you've got a trip to Denver or you've got a trip to Bozeman, you got a business trip, and hey, what the heck, throw your gear in there. The one thing, and some of this stuff might be obvious, but you should be very, very careful in the winter, right? Definitely overpack. We often tell people don't overpack, but what to pack in the wintertime? Layers and layers and layers, right? You want to have 2 pairs of longies. You want to have a pair of underwater pants, so to speak, and you definitely want to bring waders in the wintertime, right? That's almost obvious. It doesn't matter where you go in the Rocky Mountain West, you're probably going to want your waders for warmth. But nothing much else changes. You're still going to be, just packing a couple of rods. You don't need 6 of them. I would typically pack 2 rods, and I would pack a rod, for dry fly fishing, and I would pack a rod for nymphing. There is some dry fly fishing across the Rocky Mountain West in the wintertime. You can get blue-winged olives, and you can get midge. Midge is very popular on the tailwaters, or very common rather on the tailwaters across Montana, across most of the Rocky Mountain West. So in the wintertime, though, obviously dress warmly because you are in the Rocky Mountains. Places like Colorado and some places in southern Idaho. And yeah, you can get some days that are 40, 50, 60 degrees. I talked to my nephew in Denver, and they get 60-degree days down there. On the other hand, it's still the Rocky Mountains. You're still at 10,000 feet in a lot of places. Bozeman, 6,000, 7,000 feet. Obviously down around Denver, to use that as an example, you're getting up there in elevation. Storms can blow in quickly, and that can be tricky, and that can be uncomfortable, and what could be a fun day can turn into a miserable day if you're not ready. So packing in the wintertime is always going to be a little more substantial. Just use your head and make sure that you have enough layers. The other thing that I would say about a day in the winter is have a day pack. Bring a day pack. If you're going on the water, even if you're going in a drift boat, make sure that you have a day pack and you have extra clothes. That's always a good idea. And I would say that holds true. But, sometimes in the summer, we get rolling here in Montana, and it's 85 and sunny for 37, 38, 47, 67 days in a row. Half the time I tell people, just bring a raincoat because you never know. But we're in shorts and sandals, and right, totally different thing in the wintertime, obviously. So we'll jump to spring. Springtime in the Rocky Mountains has also, now if the wintertime has gotten more popular, the spring season, I would say, has gotten even more popular. And when we say spring in the Rocky Mountains, we're talking about pre-runoff. And pre-runoff means before the snowmelt starts to come out of the mountain ranges. And there can be some wonderful fishing opportunities during the pre-runoff season here in Montana and across the Rocky Mountain West. Specifically, be careful again, folks. When we talk pre-runoff, we're talking, let's just say generally, depending on where you are, mid-March to end of April. Maybe you can squeak into May, but at some point, around that end of April, 1st of May, runoff is going to start in earnest, no matter where you are. And in some places, particularly especially the freestone streams, you will start to see off-color water. You will start to see water rising. You will start to see unfishable conditions, et cetera, et cetera. So just sort of generally speaking, know that when we say pre-runoff, you hear someone, a guide or an outfit talk about the pre-runoff. We're talking mostly March and into April-ish. Not so much May. And again, I said this earlier. Watch that May, first 2 weeks of June. But spring can be wonderful. It's still early winter, right? It's still early spring, right? There's no, it's not quite summer yet. So as far as packing goes, I would pack for the pre-runoff trips the same way I would pack for the winter. I don't really differentiate those much. I was on the Bitterroot a couple, 2 Mays ago and two Aprils ago, and we were in, just shirt sleeves on a Tuesday and Wednesday, and it was 55 degrees and it was lovely, and a monster cold front rolled in, and without exaggerating, we woke up to 6 inches in the boat. Two of the folks that were with me didn't really have enough gear. Now, the nice thing is we just popped into a local shop and we got all geared up. But that can happen in the Rocky Mountains during the pre-runoff season. You can get hammered by weather that you weren't expecting. You're in a t-shirt one day, and then the next day it gets brutal, and you better be ready for it. So as far as the packing goes for the pre-runoff stuff, stick with winter. For the most part, stick with those items that you would bring if you were to go for a winter trip, winter outing in the Rocky Mountain West during the winter time. Did someone have a question, Tom? Did I see a question pop up there or no?
Todd Tanner doesn't like you talking about the flathead. And Todd he's Todd. Well, Todd is a mutual friend of ours, but he Todd also wants to know: are there certain spring creeks or small tailwaters that you can recommend when runoff hits in the Rockies and most streams and rivers blow out?
Yeah, that's a great thanks, Todd. And I'm sorry, man. Tom put me up to this whole thing. Yeah, so that's terrific, Todd. Spring creeks, I sort of gloss over them because a lot of them are private but they're wonderful. Spring creeks offer some great fishing, folks. During the time during the runoff, during snowmelt and during runoff, when even tailwaters might be a little high because they will start releasing water out of the reservoirs to make room for the water coming in from the mountains. So you can get tailwaters that will blow out during the winter as well. And then freestones will blow out. So during that time, spring creeks can be outstanding. They're pretty famous, but the Yellowstone spring creeks, Depews and Armstrongs and Nelsons, that's a great outlet. Those are super, super fun. They're super prolific. Those are great spring creeks to enjoy a day or two or five. They're down outside of Livingston, Montana. Some other small streams, I'm trying to think, Tom. Silver Creek down in Ketchum, right? That would be applicable, right? Isn't that always fishable? Do you know that, Tom?
I've never fished Silver Creek, but I think so because it's a big, it's spring fed, so I believe it's probably fishable.
Yeah. So if you're down there, there's some spring creeks in Colorado. As I said, I'm obviously, for obvious reasons, I'm a little more Montana specific, but that's a great point, Todd. Look for spring creeks if you're really Jones, and then the thing that like some of the tributaries of our big muscle rivers, there are lots of spring creeks that are off the maps. There are spring creeks that that have public access that don't necessarily get a lot of play, that aren't necessarily famous, like those Yellowstone spring creeks here in Montana, or Silver Creek down there in Idaho, or some of those other more famous ones. Where you can just, picky poke and it's public access. And I can think of a couple down in Livingston. I'm not going to mention them, Todd. But you can find spring creeks, and those are great. There's Rocky Ford over in Washington State, going the other way. I haven't even mentioned Washington State as far as being, sort of Rocky Mountain, a little more northwest, but the east side is Rocky Mountainish. So at any rate, Todd, yeah, great. Spring creeks will also work. Look for spring creeks, folks. During the runoff season. Great way to get some good conditions.
For those people Tim, I just wanted to, since we had to explain tailwaters and headwaters, spring creeks are just creeks that are mainly groundwater flow. So they pretty much come out of the ground, almost full blown sometimes. They're very clear. They are usually slow, low gradient, and they have a lot of aquatic weeds in them. So they'll be very weedy. They're very stable and relatively constant temperature, and they're usually small. So just so people understand what we're talking about. Sorry, Tim.
Right. Very good, Tom. Yeah. Oh, no. Very good. Yeah. Very good. No, interrupt anytime. It's wonderful. That keeps me moving. Let's see, down to the summer season, folks. Yeah, summer's wonderful in the Rocky Mountain West, right? It's hard to beat. Summer starts in end of June for the most part. Some years it starts earlier, some years it's a little later. Packing for summer, lots of sunshine here in the Rocky Mountain West for the most part. 75, 80, 85 and sunny, partly sunny. So we are in shorts. We wet wade, sandals and cover up, right? The sun is, we are all acting very, very differently, buffs and covering up in the summertime, but you can roll with a pair of shorts and sandals and a fishing shirt all summer long for most of this stuff in the Rocky Mountains. The one thing I would mention again, though, always bring good rain gear. It is the Rocky Mountains. Storms can blow in anywhere and they can roll in very, very quickly. So be prepared. But summer is generally lovely and you don't need a ton of extra layers when you're fishing in the Rocky Mountains in the summertime. And the fall, same thing, folks. Fall can be extended in Montana and in the Rocky Mountain West. I mean, it can go well into October and be lovely and nice. As you start to get to October, September's beautiful. September, you might want to bring an extra layer or two. Definitely start to bring waders again for warmth. Not a bad idea. But fall can be, Indian summer, fall, early summer into September can be lovely and beautiful. Generally speaking, as you start to get into October, end of September, October, keep in mind now we're talking about elevations again. Mornings will be very, very cool. Evenings will be very, very cool. Daytime can start to get very, very cool. That's the time to sort of roll back to the packing that you did, when you were fishing in the winter, and even specifically the pre-runoff stuff. Make sure you have enough layers. Tend to err on the side of bringing a little bit more rather than a little bit less in the fall. And that kind of rounds out the seasons, folks. I'll keep moving. Tackle and gear. Any questions, Tom? I think we're good. Yeah.
Yeah, we're good.
Tackle and gear.
Yeah, tackle and gear.
So moving along, folks. Yeah, tackle and gear. The one thing that I would tell people, and the one thing that that you should keep in mind, you don't always need to bring 17 rods. This is where I think things have changed over these years. People used to show up with a quiver, not good, bad, or otherwise. I'm certainly not being critical, but these days things are so specific and so finely tuned and so wonderful. Let's take the Orvis H3 rods in my case. You need to bring 2 of those rods. And the reason I say 2, you probably can get by in the Rocky Mountain West with a 4 or a 5 weight, specifically for your dry fly fishing, and maybe a 6 weight if you wanted to do some nymphing or even pull some streamers. I don't necessarily, unless you're doing something a little more specific, like throwing a big old sink tip or a depth charge sinking head or something like that, then you might want to, on a big river like the Kootenai, maybe you might bump up to a 7. But for all intents and purposes, folks, when you travel out to the Rocky Mountain West, 4, 5, and 6 weight rods are going to cover everything that you need under all circumstances, darn near every fishery that we've talked about. So don't necessarily, you don't have to bring 19 rods. You honestly don't. Airlines are getting a little bit trickier and bringing stuff is getting trickier. 2 rods, that's all you need. 4, 5, and 6s. I typically bring, when I travel, when I talk to people about traveling, I would typically bring, as I said, a dry fly rod that would be a little softer to medium action rod, and then a nymphing rod, maybe a little bit stiffer, something that would punch through the wind, because in the West, typically speaking, in a lot of places, it's not if, but at 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you're going to get a breeze. So 2 rods, if you have the luxury of bringing 2 rods, one maybe consider to be a dry fly. I'm repeating myself, and then the other one maybe a little bit stiffer, if you get some wind and you need a little faster action rod. But no need to bring a bunch of rods. If you only have 1 rod, folks, right? Lots of people only have 1 rod, and that's perfectly great too. Just don't worry about it. 5 weight rod is perfectly great. 6 weight rod is perfectly great. Medium to fast action. Going to do everything that you could possibly want to do with that 5 or 6 weight rod. No big deal at all. You're in great shape if you have one of those rods. H3s are outstanding. The Recons are great. I love the Clearwaters, Tom. I think the Orvis Clearwater rod for the money, it may be one of the best rods on the market today. I mean, I love that rod. I fish that as much as I fish an H3 these days.
I fish Clearwaters myself. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Reels, folks, just get a reel that works, right? I often, some of the guys at the shops might be grimacing at me right now, but, for trout fishing, you don't need a super duper high end reel with a lot of drag. Maybe I should put it that way. You may need a super duper high end reel if you want the looks of it, and that's great, but you don't need a bunch of drag when you're trout fishing. You just don't, particularly if you're going to be on in a drift boat. You don't need much drag at all, and especially if you're on a freestone, you can usually travel. You can usually follow that fish downstream. So I often tell people just get a good quality reel. It'll last your lifetime. You only need to bring, if you're bringing 2 rods, bring 2 reels. You'll be fine. You really will. You don't necessarily need a reel with a big drag. Leaders, that's usually subject to where you're fishing and kind of specific. But again, generally speaking, if you're going to pack a few, I would bring mostly 9 foot 4X tapered leaders. You're going to get some guides. They're going to rebuild your leader, and the first thing they're going to do, I'm just as guilty. The first thing somebody hands me a new leader, and hey, I just brought these leaders, great, and I cut off the first 6 feet and I build my own, and everybody kind of rolls their eyes. That will happen. That's a given with guides. But if you're going to pack a half a dozen leaders, 9 foot 4X for the most part will cover the ball game, all across the board here in Montana, certainly. And across the Rocky Mountain West. And you can add tippet, you can lengthen that and make it, 10 feet and add some 5X, and you can add 6X, and if you're on a spring creek, to Todd's point, you can make a 12-foot leader out of that pretty easily. But, 9 foot 3X or 9 foot 4X is perfectly good. 7.5 foot 3X, I really like. That gives you a little bit more room to build on the leader. So, 7.5 3X, 7.5 4X floating, and then if you want to bring a fluorocarbon leader specifically for streamers or nymphing, then that's fine too. That does help. But usually in that case, we will just build them with fluorocarbon, and it's going to be a shorter leader anyway. So, and that's kind of the gear talk, Tom. I mean, I didn't, we don't have enough time to necessarily go into too much detail as far as that goes.
No, I think that's fine. I mean, you're exactly right. It's pretty basic, pretty straightforward.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Okay. Don't forget, we can handle questions, folks. But I'll cover techniques very quickly as well. There are 3 basic techniques. We don't have time to go into. There's a lot more techniques than there used to be, but the 3 basic techniques were obviously dry fly fishing, nymphing, and fishing streamers. Dry fly fishing in the Rocky Mountain West is probably as good as it gets around the world. It is mostly what I would say, well, maybe not necessarily, and I certainly don't mean to be prejudiced in any way, but I think a lot of us love to fish dry flies because it's so visual, and top water action beats all in many instances. But as far as the dry fly fishing goes in the Rocky Mountain West, and specifically here in Montana, that is hatch based, and most of the major hatches. Again, you can get some hatches in the winter. You can get some great hatches during the pre-runoff. But let's face it, the bulk of the dry fly fishing centers around insect activity, and the bulk of the insect activity will be the months of June-ish, July, August, September, and into October. And that then means that that's going to be the best dry fly fishing of the 12 months of a fishery. Many, many hatches across the Rocky Mountain West. Too many to go into right now, but I think I could cover them basically. The front end of the season around the Rocky Mountain West will be more mayflies, and that would be, specifically pale morning duns, green drakes would be a couple biggies here in Montana, caddis, and then moving into the middle of the summer toward the later summer, hoppers, right? Obviously, everybody's fishing hoppers. Those will carry you through the early fall into the middle fall, and then back to maybe smaller mayflies and midge during the late fall. And again, this is all pretty general, but that's going to cover the base up and down the Rocky Mountain front. Nymphing, folks, million ways to do it these days. I would say that most of us as guides and most of us as anglers now, the Euro nymphing is getting a bunch of traction and super fun, but a lot of us are still, I say, good old-fashioned indicator nymphing because it is so effective. It is very utilitarian insofar as it's easy to set up, to get a nymphing rod set up and a nymphing rig set up, and you can fish it in a variety of waters: tailwaters, freestones, still water. Right? It's very easy to set up a nymphing rig and use it under many circumstances. You can nymph any time of year in the Rocky Mountain West. You can nymph any time of year around the country, for that matter. So super effective. And a great way. The other reason why I say super effective is, let's face it, it is true to Tom's the master. Fish are eating most of the time subsurface, and so if you're really interested in knocking down a few fish, nymphing's going to do that. You're going to be able to catch fish more often under more circumstances nymphing than certainly dry fly fishing. Streamer fishing across the Rocky Mountain West, that's sometimes how we get the big dogs, and that's a good way to get the big dogs. A little bit more work. You're gonna spend a little bit more time casting, right? Cast and retrieve, or jerk and strip. That you can find information about those techniques. It's basically just manipulating the speed of the fly, but throwing streamers across the Rocky Mountain West is I would say maybe the graduate school on one level. There's the ultra dry fly fishing to sippy fish. That's kind of graduate school, and then I would say the other end of the spectrum would be maybe learning how to fish a streamer well. And you learn how to fish a streamer well, you will catch big fish. Sometimes not as many. I often tell people you're going to be a good soldier. You're going to do the drill. So you're not going to put up numbers, but you're going to put up some donkeys, and that's a great way to do it. But brown trout in the Rocky Mountain West in the fall are spawning. Not spawning. We're not fishing them when they're spawning, but they're aggressive. They're pre-spawn. They're starting to move, become aggressive, and it's just a great way to find bigger fish in the Rocky Mountains. Absolutely. So I think that kind of. With techniques, Tom, let's see. Do I have a, let's see. I think what I'll do, not do I have, Tom, I think I've got a list, top 10 flies. I'll cover, folks. Everybody asks, so I'll cover top 10 flies. This would be more Montana specific, right? This is going to be a little more Montana specific, but having said that, mistake. These are some of the finest patterns that, in my opinion, consistently some of the finest patterns for trout fishing across the globe. So my top 10 flies, I'll start with sort of the mayfly silhouette, and I'll start dry. The Craig Matthews Sparkle Dun is my all-time favorite mayfly imitation. The reason I love it, it floats great. I can see it. Anglers can see it. It's a great silhouette. It's the perfect combination between an adult and an emerger. And that can be very important sometimes, right? A little too detail oriented. Yeah. I never do that, Tom. Yeah.
I have a Sparkle Dun tattooed. That's obviously my favorite fly. Yeah, pretty incredible. Craig Matthews, thanks, Craig. And it just covers the bases everywhere on every hatch in a variety of sizes, in a variety of colors. And I'm not a tire. This is the other brilliant thing Craig did. I'm not a tire. Even I can tie a Sparkle Dun. So I love them. A pet number two would be
any version of a parachute, right? So just again, covering the mayfly silhouette. Used to be a parachute Adams. That was the only thing on the list for a long time, but now we got purple haze and golden haze and brown haze, and but they're basically just parachute style dry flies, and those are great. You can see them, especially when they're tiny. They float well. They're extremely versatile as well. You can get them in all shapes, sizes, and colors now, and I think they offer a great silhouette. A little broader. I love that the hackle sits, up above, so to speak. They're a little broader profile, but they still sit flush in the water column as far as that goes. They're not sitting way up on the surface of the water. So Matthew Sparkle Duns, purple haze, or a parachute, any parachute style would be number 2. And then for a bigger dry fly, I love a chubby, like everybody else these days. If I'm going, stonefly silhouette or hopper. I mean, we fish hoppers now. It's almost hilarious. We call hopper and dropper. I don't know that I fished a hopper pattern last year. Literally, sounds goofy, folks, but I fished a chubby every other day, and then there's a couple other patterns now that are super popular. But chubbies float. You can see them. You can't sink them. They're a great dry fly for a big bug, a big insect imitation. Moving toward emergers and nymphs, all-time favorite, Tom Rosenbauer's rabbit's foot emerger. And I think I told Tom this when that first was launched. Oh boy, Tom, 1909 now, way back in the day.
Yes, back when I had a Model T. I had a Model T then.
Right.
You're not much younger than I am, Lenny.
I'm not at all. I know it. But when it first launched, I grabbed some of those, and I used them specifically on the Kootenai River, and in other places I use the sulfur. Tom calls it sulfur colored, but it is effectively a great pale morning dun emerger as well. Nothing beats it. I love an emerger, folks, when I'm fishing a dry and a dropper, and that Rosenbauer's rabbit's foot is a great emerger, surface film, so to speak, fly. More traditional now, same thing, cripples, emergers. I love a Quigley cripple. That's now become a pretty popular fly as well, but I love that Quigley cripple. For caddis, I love a Bloom's, Dave Bloom over on the Missouri River, Dave Bloom's elk hair caddis. That is the reason I love that caddis is because you can see it. It's a posted caddis, but it still rides very, very flush on the surface of the water. And variety of shapes, sizes, and colors. I would compare it in a way to Craig Matthews' Sparkle Dun insofar as it is easy to tie, it is utilitarian, you can't sink it. It's not, it's a parachute style, but it's a little bit different. It's just a great caddis pattern. You can fish it a dry dropper, you can fish a teeny tiny one. It's just a great, great caddis pattern. Moving into nymphs, beadhead pheasant tail, can't leave home without it. Some version of a rubber leg stonefly, you know what I mean? Just a Pat's rubber leg or whatever they call them. Streamers, I love an Orvis. I think Orvis designed it, Tom. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the Zudler, is that an Orvis pattern, Tom? I think from years ago, the Zudler, conehead muddler.
I am not sure, Tim. I am honestly not
okay.
sure.
But anyway, a Zudler. I love a Zudler, folks. It's essentially a bunny stripped conehead streamer. And then I love a Kelly Gallup's Circus Peanut. And that's a bigger, broader streamer. We use them up here on the Kootenai, big water streamer. I mean, you can fish them small, but those would be my top 10 flies, and they're all pretty straightforward, and you can find them anywhere now. But I tend to be utilitarian based with my fly patterns. I want something that's going to float. You're going to get those difficult sippy fish, rising fish, and educated fish, and those are really cool, and you really have to be thoughtful, and you really have to fish some different stuff. But those 10 flies, those 10 patterns are pretty solid across the board most of the time for me. I'll keep moving, Tom. I see we're closing up here a little bit, but I'll just should we key up the Kootenai, all things Kootenai, Tom? Should we key up the slideshow?
Let's key up the Kootenai. Let's key it up.
Okay.
Let's see if I can manage it.
Well, I'm glad you're handling that.
Okay.
So yeah, kind of covered a lot of coming. Yep, okay, I'm loading. Yeah, go ahead. You can cut to the next slide. We can start with Libby. Yep.
Okay. Oops. There.
Yep. Or back up to Libby one, or did that go? There you go. Yep. There you one back, Tom.
Oh, sorry. Oops. Oh,
oops.
You're gonna fire. You're gonna fire me. Okay.
Good. No, great.
Right.
So we covered
I'm
a lot
under
of
control now,
folks, and okay. We covered a lot of information, and I moved through some of that stuff quickly, but I hope that gave a broad overview of, sort of Western Montana and generally, general Western fishing 101. But now we'll finish up with the Kootenai. This is obviously specific to where I am. This is my home fishery. This is a very, very cool place, folks. It's a little less traveled than most of the other mussel rivers around the state. And the Kootenai is a tailwater fishery. And the Kootenai Reservoir is above the Libby Dam in Libby, Montana. And you can see as a text 100 miles long. This is monster water. This is big country. This is the spine of the Northern Rocky Mountains. This area of the state, folks, is very, very cool. It's kind of a place where the Pacific rainforest ecosystem crashes into the spine of the Northern Rockies. This isn't typical big sky country. It looks and smells like Christmas every day, conifers, deep, dark timber. For those of you in the Northeast, it smells and looks like Maine on steroids. But it's very, very different up here in the northwest corner. You leave the sort of rolling big sky country down there around Missoula, and you come up into this area, and it's an entirely different place. Below the Libby Dam now, this is a tailwater. There's the Libby Dam, approximately 40 miles of fishable water down to the border of Idaho. Rainbows, west slope cutthroats, bull trout, and mountain whitefish. Go ahead, Tom. Yep. Big and broad and best fish from a drift boat. Doesn't mean you can't wade, right? You could actually wade right where we're sticking. You could wade right there where we're sticking those boats in, folks. But if you look at that slide, you come and you step up to the Kootenai River. It's 250, 300 yards wide. So it is a big, when I say mussel river, this is what I'm talking about. The Kootenai is big. And you can't really access a lot of the good areas without a drift boat on the Kootenai, even when we come down to summer flows. So this just, for all intents, it doesn't mean there isn't wading. Call me up. I'll point you in the right direction. We can have some great wading during the summertime. But again, I'm speaking in general terms because we're moving through this stuff quickly. Best fished from a drift boat. It's just one of those fisheries. It's a big Western mussel river, and you are going to have better success and better access with a boat for sure. That's the average rainbow on the Kootenai River, and I'll close out my show. No, I had to, below every dam, there are a bunch of big fish. That's my token big rainbow trout right there, folks. The reason I put that there is it's actually the opposite. That is not the average on the Kootenai. Please don't come up here. The world record the state record rainbow trout was caught below the Libby Dam, and it was 34 pounds. And I think we got that fish on a streamer, and I think it was pushing 13 or 14. But that's not what the Kootenai is about. Next slide, Tom. That's what the Kootenai is about, guys. So the Kootenai is bread and butter, 12 to 14 inch rainbows, west slope cutthroats, super acrobatic, a native strain of rainbows in the Kootenai. They're not pure in the Kootenai any longer, but there are native strains, inland red band rainbow trout in the tributaries of the Kootenai River. So these fish were actually here up to the last glacial ice age. This is a strain of rainbow trout that was essentially shut off during the last glacial ice age. These were steelhead that went up and down. The Kootenai is a tributary of the Columbia. These fish used to go up and down into the Columbia River and out to the ocean. So this is kind of a unique species up here, super, super cool, super acrobatic, super, super strong for their size. But that's bread and butter. That's what we see on the Kootenai, 12 to 14 inches. Throw in a couple 16 to 18-inch fish, and it's been a wonderful day.
Tim, isn't it true that the Kootenai is the only major Montana river where cutthroats are native, truly native? Or I mean, rainbows are truly native.
Yes. Rainbows.
So if you want to catch a
right.
native
I knew what you meant, Tom.
Montana rainbow. Yeah. Pretty cool.
Right. And they're largely, it is cool, Tom. Yeah. And the people forget that rainbows were stocked across the Rocky Mountains with railroads, right, Tom? I mean, that's what happened. Yeah. Rainbows, I think they're so associated with the Rocky Mountain West, but they're not native to the Rocky Mountain West. Yeah. These were steelhead that got shut off. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's just kind of not just kind of, that's just a shot of where we like to fish the Kootenai and why it's maybe, that's a channel best fish from a drift boat. That's a channel, and these channels would load up with fish, and you can see it just drops into a nice bucket, and those fish will be right there against that bank all the way down that good current. Just a general shot of, where to find them. Yep. You can just keep cycling through, Tom. Yeah, that's it. Take a kid fishing, folks. We get some bruisers. I mean, I kind of lay off the bruiser thing because, it gives the wrong idea, Tom. I just try and give people I just want to stick with bread and butter and what we see every day. The other thing I would say about the Kootenai, folks, we consider it a dry fly fishery. We spend most of our time fishing dry flies on the Kootenai River, and you can see it's broad and flat. That's begging to be fished with a dry fly. That's just great dry fly fishing. Bull trout, another native species up here on the Kootenai River. Super, super cool. Big predator. Awesome creature. Can't target them on the Kootenai, guys. Cannot target them. What does targeting mean? I'm often asked, what does targeting bull trout mean? They will lay up in 3 or 4 feet of water, and you can see 8 or 10 bull trout, 5 to 15 pounds, laying in 3 or 4 feet of water. If I drop the anchor and we start casting to those bull trout, that's targeting bull trout. But what we can do, and I certainly don't mean this to ever be wink wink, you can pull a streamer on the Kootenai River all day, every day, and there's nothing wrong with that. And we do, I don't have to hide this or anything. We get bull trout. They live there. You pull a streamer, you'll get them. So it's inadvertent, but they're awesome and they're lovely. And I'm also, I'm super, super proud on one level that the Kootenai still has an intact native fishery. And they are lovely. They are beautiful. They look they are part of the char family. They're not a salmonidae like rainbows and cutthroats and salmon. These are part of the char family. Brook trout, Arctic char, bull trout, very, very different. They're a fall spawner, but you can see they look a little bit like Dolly Varden is sometimes the common name in the Pacific Northwest. But you can see they have that white leading edge and they have pink spots, overgrown brook trout even, right? I mean, kind of, yep, not quite as dark, but they have that beautiful olive golden color. The other thing I would tell folks, Tom, about, go ahead. You're good, Tom. Yep, thanks. You step up to the Kootenai, folks. It's huge. It's broad. Where do I find fish? Trout, folks. It's a big river, but they're going to be near structure. They're going to be on the seams. Don't worry about what's in the middle of the Kootenai River. You've got about 30 or 40, 50 feet off of one bank, 30 or 40 feet off the other bank, unless you're in a boat, and then you can fish wherever you want. But stick with structure, stick with seams, stick with tailouts, stick with riffles. It's a big river, but trout are trout. They live in exactly the same place on the Kootenai River as they do on the Battenkill River or whatever your home river might be. Yep, go ahead, Tom. This is an interesting shot. I love this one, folks. This is where we really, really love the Kootenai River. you can see there's actually two channels coming in on the left and the right, and we call these flats. And this offers some of the greatest dry fly fishing, as far as I'm concerned, in the northwest part of Montana. That's about 2.5, 3 feet deep, and you can see it gliding out into the front, the top of the screen, where Tom's got the cursor going, and the bottom just slowly starts to drop out 2.5, 3 feet, 4.5, 5 feet, 5.5, 6 feet. Those are the places where fish will stack up. Those are the places where we will sit, drop the anchor, and it's just a perfect place for fish to be sitting, and a perfect place to fish a dry fly during a PMD hatch, during a caddis hatch, rolling hoppers off those drop-offs, et cetera, et cetera. So wherever the flats start to meet a drop-off like that, that's classic Kootenai. "50-50 on the water." Go ahead, Tom. Yep. "Creature." That's an old Orvis pattern, I think.
Casey's Creature. Yeah. Good fly.
Yeah.
Good fly.
Yeah. Yep. Go ahead. That's what we love about the Kootenai, folks. It's very visual, a lot of flat water like that, a lot of dry fly fishing. And as far as I'm concerned, nothing beats July, August, September, and into October. And that's pretty much what we live for right there.
Or that.
Yeah, pretty. I started earlier, Tom, the nice thing about the Kootenai. Yeah, they're super acrobatic folks. So we're not going to average. I'm just straight with people after all these years. Bread and butter, 12 to 14 inches. It's not like we don't get. You're seeing some 16 to 18 inch, some 16 to 20 inch fish, but that's bread and butter. But that's not uncommon. Kootenai rainbow will jump 3 or 4 times and peel off 50 feet of line before you even know. That you've got him, right? So these fish are super acrobatic. It's also a lot less traveled. It's far less traveled up here. You got to want to be here. We're destination oriented. But I didn't take any of these slides to keep other boats or other anglers out of the frame, right? It's just nice. It's always a catch-22. Here I am. I'm speaking to an audience and I'm inviting people to come up here. I don't want to ruin what's best about the Kootenai, but it is far less traveled. If you're looking for a place that's a little bit off the beaten path, this is a good place to check out. Classic summer shot, right? Endless days. We can get endless days like that, 75, 80 degrees, and just beautiful, beautiful conditions. And naturally, all the big fish are in the slides. How can you not do that?
Yeah. Oh, that's nice water.
Again, folks, it is nice water, Tom. The other thing I would mention about reading a big stream, a big river like this, it's pretty obvious. Trout are trout. That's wadeable right there, actually. Don't worry about what's 10 feet deep. That's where the fish are. I would spend an hour right there picking that apart. Even on the Kootenai River, that's what you want to look for. Yeah. Big gravel islands, and this is also fun on the Kootenai. Again, that's why it's sometimes best fish from a boat, folks, because there are big gravel islands in the middle of the river. You cannot get to them ever by wading. If you tried to wade across under even the lowest flows on the Kootenai River, if you tried to wade out into the middle to one of those gravel islands, they'd fish your butt out of the Columbia River downstream 200 miles. So, it's big. Yeah, it's big. Right, there you go, right? That's how much water that's the Kootenai Falls. Beautiful, spectacular series of Kootenai Falls. That scene from The Revenant, the Leo DiCaprio movie, was filmed right there on the Kootenai Falls, where the guy goes over the falls. Yep. Bread and butter Kootenai rainbow, right there, guys, right there, and right there below the gravel island. That's as obvious as the day, right? Those fish are going to stack up right where I have the boat anchored. Uh, that's where the food is. That's the grocery store. That's where trout love it. Right. There's the cursor. Tom is exactly right and pointing right to where we poked that fish and spun around and took a photo. But that's bread and butter Kootenai rainbow. Most often during July, August, September, October. Yep. Nice sample.
I don't
I'll cover
see-
some of those. There you
I don't see any rabbit's feet in there.
I don't. I keep them in a special box.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Where would the fish be here, Tom? Show folks. Yeah, no, whatever. It's okay.
Here?
No.
Anywhere.
The last slide. Yeah.
Oh.
Now we can keep moving. Yeah,
No, I'm not going back.
it's all right.
I know where the fish are there.
Yeah.
I know where the fish are on this slide right here,
Yeah, right.
right in front of me.
Yeah,
I can find that one.
yeah.
And one of Joanne's lunches.
yeah, you
I
can-
assume.
Yep. So you can make a lunch with love, and she sure loves to feed people. Yep. You keep moving, Tom. We have several. We have a couple small creeks and streams. Yep.
Pretty.
Usually by about yeah.
Nice.
And you can roll through those, Tom. Yeah. They start to get, and again, to be real forward with people, Tom, those start to get, pretty skinny. You know what I mean? So we fish those mostly into July, and then they'll start to get kind of skinny, and we start to lay off them. But that's pretty typical of our small stream stuff. Those are native rainbows. That's when I would throttle down. We'll fish 2 weights and 3 weights and things of that. Smaller rod, right tool for the right job. But the nice thing about that is, you can fish a royal wolf all day long. Yeah, you can fish a small chubby all day long and not even think about. You could lose the chubby and tie on a piece of your shoelace and still probably catch fish. So. Yeah, we got 2 lodging options. We have our cabins here in the Yak Valley, and they are perfect for 2 to 4 people, fully self-contained, lovely and beautiful. Joanne's done a spectacular job. Flannel sheets. Close your eyes and imagine the coolest, most cute as a button, quaint little log cabin in the woods. That's what our Yak experience is about. You can keep going there, Tom. Yep. Whoops. Not that. Oh, yeah. Okay, here they come. Yeah, these will be interior. Yeah. And from here, the Yak, guys, it's about an hour drive. This is where I live, folks. But I drive up and down to the Kootenai River, which is in Libby every day. So it's about an hour from the Yak. So you'll go up and down. If you stay with us in the Yak, you'll go up and down each day. This is our River Lodge. The Kootenai River House sleeps up to 8 people. We're a little bit different business model. We don't mix parties. So if you stay with us down here at our Kootenai River House, you have your party has the whole place. Right on the banks of the Kootenai River, 9.5 acres, great lawns for casting, just a spectacular piece of property. Lovely scenery out the front door, the Cabinet Mountains, 8, 9, 10,000 feet right out across the river. Just a lovely place to hang your hat for 5 or 6 days.
Is that a deer outside the
Thank
window?
you very much, Tom. Yeah. Those are apple trees, and they really come to them in the fall. Yeah. Joanne really loves locally sourced, folks. She does a great job. Everything on that plate came out of her garden, and she prefers it that way. She loves to locally source most of our stuff. Most of the stuff that she feeds folks down at the River Lodge is from within 100 miles of where we live. All local gardens and local beets and local mushrooms that she gets herself. Those are morels and the green beans and made with love. That's the front yard at the river house and the Cabinet Mountains, and that's pretty much what it looks like all summer and fall. Yep, and that's it. We're based in Libby, and thank you, Tom. Terrific, outstanding.
Those were amazing. I want to go right now.
You're welcome anytime. Yeah. Open invitation.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. Terrific. Any questions, folks?
I think I don't see any new questions, dude. I've been looking at the slideshows. Where's the closest airport?
I just got one, Tom.
That's a good one.
Yeah. Closest. That is a good one, right? I forgot. Yep. So there's a couple of options, folks. You can fly into Missoula. I'll start down there. That's about 4 hours from where we are. It's about 3 hours from the river, from the Kootenai, from Libby, Montana. It's about 4 hours from our yak location. That works if you're going to be doing something around Missoula. If you're coming specifically here to just do a destination stay with us, you can fly into Kalispell, Montana, about 100 miles, right? Glacier National Park. Or more often than not, most of our clients fly in and out of Spokane, Washington, Tom, which is 120 miles to our southwest. The reason for that is Spokane is that perfect airport. It's got all the major carriers, offers way more, rates and, just better opportunities for flights. Kalispell often only has one flight, sometimes two flights. So Spokane, Washington, I would say is top choice, Missoula or Kalispell after that. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Julia.
Well, thank you everyone for hanging in there, and thank you for your great questions. I hope I got you all excited about fishing with Tim or fishing Montana in general. I know I did. And there were some great questions. We appreciate you staying up with us and hanging out with us. And we're going to be doing some more of these over the next few weeks. Next week is, I think it's Brown Hobson and Drew. Drew is going to host Brown. I think it's Brown Hobson. And then I'm going to do one. But I know I'm going to do one with
Kip.
With Kip Veith, yep, on warm water fishing.
Yeah.
Pike and smallmouth. And then also with, I can't remember the other one I'm doing. Drew, help me. Anyway, we'll post them. We'll post them. But we'll be for the next 4 Thursdays, we'll be talking to one of our endorsed partners and talking to you about fisheries in various parts of the country. So we hope we help you do a little bit of your vacation planning for this coming summer or next summer. So thank you everyone for tuning in, and Mr. Linehan, thank you so much for all your hard work. It was a pleasure. It's always great talking to you, and I hope to see you soon.
Thank you, Tom. Thanks for including me. Thank you for including me.
All right, okay. Everyone. Good night, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks for being here, folks. Yeah, thank you.